And like I did in Colorado, if I got to sit in solitary and not comply with any of your, I had to sit in solitary for 12 days. It wasn't like nothing, although I had a lot of fun with it. I made them feed me vegan too, because I'm vegan, and it's a right you can claim in jail.
Welcome to How I Embraced the Suck, a podcast where you get to hear from veterans what life in the military is really like. I am your host, Walt, and before we start, you should know that I do not censor the show in any way. You have been warned. Hopefully I will remember to make notes about questions that I have. I often do that poorly, but I'm not very accomplished. But yeah, cool. Well, today we have Adam, who used to fire big guns in the Marines and now shows off his big guns online. What's up, Adam?
Oh, man. That's like the most awkward introduction I've ever received. But yeah,
I like to start it off just a little weird.
Yeah, very, very suitable to the military culture angle. Absolutely. There's nothing more awkward than killing for politicians. Well, and to all the guys in the military who are homophobic, or if any homophobes might be listening, let me make it a little more awkward. If you've ever been on a high school football team or in the military, you've already showered with a gay dude.
Right.
You said I could take this wherever I want. I'm going to tell dumb military jokes.
It goes wherever you want. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So you were in the Marines. What was?
You could tell from the stupid look on my face, huh? That's a dead giveaway. Oh, was it the crayons in my teeth?
Yeah, I was gonna say you're not drooling crayons, so.
Sorry, you're gonna ask an intelligent question?
Well, I attempt to. It's a rarity when I do, but I try to get them out. Yeah. What was kind of your motivation for joining?
I want to be the first kid on my block with a confirmed kill. And I know that's a cliche, tongue-in-cheek kind of answer. That's a line from Full Metal Jacket, from the Joker character, being a smartass. But to me, that was actually a parody of the serious reason I joined. And I wanted to have my life on the line for something I believed in, and I believed in defending the country at the time, not knowing that the military does no such thing. I wanted to protect people I cared about, and joining the military. That's why I joined the military. I joined the Marines because I wanted to be first to fight. To me, the risk of it was really important to my naive and misguided sense of what it means to be a warrior. And, a warrior is someone who's willing to put their life on the line to do the right thing, and is a noble individual who will defend those who cannot defend themselves. And in order to be a warrior, you have to have moral agency. You have to be able to make those moral decisions for yourself. By contrast, a soldier is a fucking pussy shill of a man who has agreed to kill for politicians. Big difference, right? And joining the U.S. military, you can make little excuses. Well, I'm a warrior because fuck you. You're a soldier. You're a soldier. You follow orders. Maybe you don't kill for politicians yourself, sure, or never would based on your billet, but you signed up to be a part of that effort. If you're not killing people for politicians, you're helping kill people for politicians. The military does not protect our country. It protects the power of people who have illegitimate power, and the purpose of our government is to make the rich richer at the expense of everybody else. So I don't want to serve bankers, politicians, and war profiteers anymore, and I realize that. But yeah, like I really wanted, in that sense of being a soldier, I was as sick of a bootlicker as they came. I actually told people that if my government decides that someone should die, I'm going to assume it's righteous, and I want to be the one pulling the trigger. How fucking dumb, naive, and propagandized by the government-run school system do you have to be to think that when the American government has only killed people who deserve to be killed? I would say that's the 0.0001% exception. I mean, maybe when they bomb a city full of innocent people, they get a few child molesters. But, other than that, no, the U.S. government's foreign policy, pretty much since its inception, actually since the Constitution, which was an illegal coup against the legitimate Articles of Confederation, we had an ethical, voluntary, and anti-militarism Constitution before our current one. The founders of this country were against standing armies. They wanted a militia-based defense that was integrated with the people so that it couldn't be used for wars of aggression or adventurism, or like to put down a whiskey rebellion, or to project American power on the behalf of corporate interests. And obviously, we went the wrong way with that. We should have listened to those founders, not the framers who fucked it all up with the Constitution, creating a new strong central authority for a standing army, a central bank, the intellectual property racket, taxation, no shit, and a host of other powers that are fundamentally unethical and illegitimate. Yes, that's why I joined the military, and why I would never join again.
Right. Well, I mean that at the heart of why you did that's a really common reason for a lot, especially young kids, to join, to serve and to fight for freedom and all that. Yeah.
And it's so naive. It's a dangerous, based on a series of dangerous lies that are relatively easy to expose. And, there are a lot of libertarians out there. I'm a libertarian, obviously, voluntarist specifically. I believe in self-ownership and ethics. I believe that you, as a free, beautiful, independent human being, you own yourself. And that means that creates the standard of ethics of what we as libertarians call the non-aggression principle, and that it is morally wrong to use force, fraud, or coercion against someone to violate their self-ownership, their right to life, liberty, and not just pursuit of happiness, but of property, that you can mix your labor with natural resources. You can trade in peace to acquire wealth, and you can't do anything to violate that with force or fraud or coercion. That would be the threat of force. And so there are a lot of libertarians who will be anti-foreign policy, but I don't think they really get the implications of that in terms of, well, it's still not okay to force people into an army or steal from a population, and yes, taxation is theft, in order to support a standing army. And so it's not just enough to be anti-war. You really have to be anti-militarism in the sense that I said anti-soldiering. But anti-militarism is anti the institutions that pervert warriors into soldiers, or rather have young men grow up propagandized so as to not know the difference. And it's counter-recruiting, what we called it. I got my start in activism with Iraq Veterans Against the War. And back then I was really compelled by, holy fuck, there's still people dying on the other side of the world because the American people don't know my story. Not that my story was the best or the only one, but, I really wanted to pile on with my experience and say, this is bullshit. This is a war crime. I am a war criminal. And I don't just mean in the vague abstract sense, just so your listeners know, this is in part a political rant of, I'm a war criminal because I supported the war and I was there. But no, I actually tortured people. I violated the Geneva Conventions personally. I followed orders that by military law I should have disobeyed. And I don't have some crazy Abu Ghraib story. My story in and of itself isn't that significant in the course of military history. But I was at the first siege of Fallujah in April 2004 with a 6-man civil affairs team attached to Mike Company 2-1. And we were responsible, the infantry company, Mike 2-1, was, and if anybody's like, oh my God, he's anti-militarism, he must be an idiot. Yeah, fuck you if I got some of the numbers wrong. I got pictures. Yeah, I was in Fallujah. I'm pretty sure it was Mike 2-1. It might have been a different unit. I don't give a fuck. Yeah, I know I'm going to trigger some of your pro-militarism audience members here. I'm just going to cut off that
Oh, they
bullshit.
they shut it off within 2 minutes. I'm
Oh, they're
sure.
done. Oh, they're gone already. All right, cool. I don't have
Yeah,
to. I don't
they're
have to.
probably gone.
I don't have to blow smoke up stupid asses. But yeah, so with Mike 2-1, we were responsible for the blockade position on the west side of the city of Fallujah during the first battle. So most people know the Battle of Fallujah as the second battle, which was the battle, the big one where they swept through the city. But there was the first battle that I was at in April when the Blackwater security agents went across we called it the George Washington Bridge, and then were pulled out of their vehicles and strung up on the northern bridge and burned alive. No, I think they're already dead at that point. Burned. They had their bodies burned though on that bridge on international television. And so the first battle was putting the city under siege. And I mean, I could talk about the political implications about that for the rest of the show if you want. But one night, I was asked to guard some detainees. And this is when we were letting women and children out of the city only. We were told, if he looks old enough to be in your fighting hole, he's too old to leave the city. And it's like, oh, so we're just going to kill anybody who happens to be in the city? You know, and I didn't have the wherewithal at the time to object. I even I may have condemned several young men to their deaths because I ran the checkpoint on the Brooklyn Bridge, and there were some families trying to get out with some adult men who were just like, please, I'm not a fighter. I'm with my family. I just want to go with my family. And, you know, that was one thing by protocol. But there were a number of families that had teenage boys. And I said, I don't know, you look old enough to pick up a rifle, get the fuck back in Fallujah. And so people were trying to get out. And a couple guys who had escaped were being guarded in a shack next to the Brooklyn Bridge, like a little guard shack. And I was asked to come and guard them in the middle of the night, just I think for a 4-hour shift, just to cover for one of the grunts. And I wasn't told to torture them. I was told to keep them in these stress positions and guard them in a way that they weren't able to go to sleep. So it was stress position torture and sleep deprivation torture. And you might say it's not a big deal to sit crosswood on a hard floor, but sit crosswood on a hard floor with your hands tied behind your back and a sandbag over your head without being allowed to go to the bathroom. In about 10 minutes, that becomes a stress position. And then you shit yourself and piss yourself. And the guys that I was guarding had clearly been there in their own waste for hours when I got there. And I don't know how it would have gone, but I really wish I had been a warrior instead of a soldier, because I said, aye, sir. And, you know, with no particular sadistic inclinations, but with enthusiasm for carrying out my orders, I did it. And I poked them with my rifle tip a little bit, my muzzle, to, you know, make sure when they looked like they were nodding off, and I taunted them with my Arabic to keep them awake. You know, so it's not the most brutal torture story, you know, of all the shit that happened in the global war on terror. It's relatively mild, but in hindsight, it was really the low point of my life. And I knew as it was happening that it was wrong. And I shuffled that idea to the back of my head so I could do my duty, to be a good soldier instead of being a warrior. And what was the fucking question anyway? So I want people to have that understanding from my experience.
Yeah. How afterward? How did you deal with that?
I buried it
personally,
for years.
Having had that experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I buried it for years, and I let them convince me that my PTSD was just a little bit of combat stress, no big deal. And, you know, all right, soldier through it, whatever. You know, Marine Corps up. And I volunteered to go back. And then I got in trouble for having brought a pistol back as a souvenir for my first tour. And, you know, some people...
You just didn't hide it well enough. That's all.
Yeah, right. Well, you're not a real Marine until you get busted down once or twice. I'm very proud. Like Chesty Puller said, I made it all the way from sergeant back down to corporal. That's what I got out as. But yeah, if people listening to like the first 5 minutes of this podcast think, oh my gosh, he joined the military to be a subversive and just go in and like, no, I really drank all the Kool-Aid. I really believed in all of it. And, when I went through, that narrative suggests that I was like ideologically, and I was a libertarian, but I was really a libertarian leaning moderate. I wasn't an ideologue. I didn't really get it. I wasn't paying that much attention to politics when I enlisted at age 17. So, and no 17-year-old, really very few, have the kind of worldview that I do now at 40. Right? That should be pretty obvious. Sure. And so I am not bragging about being good at learning from I'm in the Marine Corps. I was in the Marine Corps. We learned the hard way. Like that's right. The MO. So, but I do learn. And it really, it took me a while to process everything. And I might have kept it buried. I'm not bragging that I'm open-minded or anything like that. Or that I have some. I mean, I do now because I've trained myself to have a nose for bullshit and intellectual integrity and wanting to maintain that. But at the time, what really made me anti-war was being pissed off about my personal experience, because I was a sergeant with a combat action ribbon and a Navy Commendation Medal that was supposed to have a V, but it came off in the awards process, whatever. But yeah, I have a NAVCOM, I have a car, I speak Arabic, I have a combat deployment under my belt, and you're not going to deploy. I was ready to deploy again. I was so, and the military is a murder cult, obviously. So I was still in that cult mentality. And I was still bearing my experiences, but I ended up managing a barracks and mowing lawns at Camp Pendleton while sort of on hold for my disciplinary processing over having brought a pistol back. And I was like, and then they gave me my Navy Commendation Medal literally the day before they stripped my rank from sergeant to corporal. And I was just, and that was a month. So, and then at that point, it was near the end of my year of activation, and I started processing out, and I was heartbroken. I fucking cried in front of a female warrant officer because my code for reenlistment was whatever it is, RE4, like not welcome back, basically.
Right. Right.
And I was like, I'm not planning on coming back, but that's just an unnecessary kick in the nuts. Fuck
yeah.
You.
Salt on the wound.
Yeah. I mean, like, and I owned up to to having brought the pistol back the whole time. Was it dishonorable to violate regs and take a souvenir? It wasn't a war trophy. I paid for it. It was really cool. It was a slide 9mm Glock or 9mm Beretta, very similar to our service pistols, but narrower, with little gold medallions on the pistol grips and an engraving from Saddam Hussein as a gift to one of his officers on the slide. So some asshole officer probably has it now because it's his trophy instead of mine.
Right.
But yeah, I owned up to it. It was a victimless crime. And I wish I could say I was smart and open-minded, and that's why I figured out the truth about militarism. But no, I was just fucking pissed off and disgruntled when I got out. Enough to really start questioning things, and I'm pretty smart. And I think, except for in terms of the blind spots of my emotional attachment to militarism at the time, I do have a very high standard of intellectual integrity. I don't accept contradictions. I follow my curiosities. If someone says something that I don't know, I ask. I don't play along. I'll stop and say, hey, I don't know that term. I don't know what you're talking about. Can you explain to me? I'm ignorant. I'm as smart as I am because I'm not shy about being ignorant. And I've really enjoyed, since I got out of the military, an incredible education from the internet, from studying history, but also from my fellow activists. I got my start in full-time activism soon after getting out of the Marine Corps with Iraq Veterans Against the War. And I met a lot of Vietnam veterans against the war. And, I've learned to address all of my emotional hangups that have prevented me from at least questioning authority with integrity.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
This is what your show is always about, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's really, wherever the guest goes, I try to give the listener a glimpse into military life that you're not going to get from public media. So,
well,
I think we're hitting all the buttons today.
You got that. Yeah, no, to underscore your point, people of my perspective are extremely censored on the internet. And I have a YouTube channel with over 250,000 subs and 100 million views. And as soon as I started mentioning that virus, which shall not be named, and questioning the ever-wise pandemic policy of our overlords in government, now I got censored like a motherfucker, but I was already shadow banned. I've been banned and shadow banned on Facebook. I've been shadow banned on Twitter. I'm still active there, but I'm really excited for Telegram as a censorship-free platform, and all the blockchain stuff like Odyssey. I'm on Odyssey now for videos. But yeah, man, congratulations. I'm really excited to be doing your show in particular, because this analysis that I'm presenting, this understanding of my own military experience, my understanding of government, my understanding of foreign policy, my understanding of militarism and the corruption of government and the military-industrial complex, not just from study, but firsthand experience, is one that is felt by a lot of vets and actually a lot of active duty guys. And it's sort of like the average American. We know they're lying to us. They know that we're lying to us. We know that they know that we know that they're lying to us, and still they're lying to us, which is a paraphrase of a Solzhenitsyn quote, by the way. But the point is not to get you to believe the lie. It's to get you to accept the lie and go along with it, knowing that it's a lie, because then they can lie you into anything. If they can convince you to hate people that you've never met, they can convince you to murder strangers on the other side of the world. And that's one of the most dangerous things that we give up as warriors in that moral autonomy. And we say, fuck it, I'm just going to be a soldier. I'll give me money and a fancy uniform and blow smoke up my ass and pin fancy medals to my chest, and I'll go kill for politicians who I know are corrupt, who I know get their money from the military-industrial complex and from the bankers and from the corporations that run this country. And I'm not left or right, so don't get me wrong. I'm a capitalist. I'm an anarcho-capitalist, if you want to put that label on it. I prefer voluntarist as a libertarian, which is really focusing on the ethical message I described earlier rather than any particular economic system. But yeah, I believe in the right to own property and free trade. But all of these systems that we've been told are capitalist are really corporatist. And Mussolini described fascism as the merging between corporations and the state. Now, you have to have your head up your ass to look around America and pretend that corporations and the state aren't in bed with each other.
Yeah,
and that is who you are serving when you join the military.
Yeah, the distinction between a warrior and a soldier is a good one. I like the kind of the images that it brings to mind. I've heard have you heard of Jacob George or Jacob David George? He was involved in some of the he was a songwriter and whatnot. Since passed, but he was talking about some of that stuff too, and that I found that really interesting. He was talking about it as a kind of a healing for him. But yeah, anyways.
Well, hey,
this is about you.
Hold on. Since you mentioned that idea of healing.
Yeah.
I run a nonprofit here in my homestead on my 10 acres in the Arizona mountains in the middle of nowhere, called Homefront Battle Buddies, homefrontbattlebuddies.org. And our mission is to get veterans stoned in the woods. No, wait. It's to facilitate veterans exploring alternative healing therapies that are not available through government services. Psilocybin, MDMA, ketamine, ayahuasca, LSD, whatever we can safely facilitate that vets want to explore here, we're going to do that. As the C3, we don't provide any of it. We're just the facilitator. Me personally, Adam Kokesh,
Okay.
I grow mushrooms and give them away to my fellow veterans here, and I'm happy saying that publicly because I just defeated charges for felony 2 psilocybin distribution in Colorado with a religious defense. So fuck them.
Sure.
When the government says we're charging you with a crime, they're saying you better plead guilty and say you're sorry and accept this punishment, or else we're going to assemble a jury of your peers and get their permission to fuck you even harder. And when it comes to mushrooms, sorry, they've reached. Have you done mushrooms?
No, not myself. No.
I'm sorry to hear that. Well, there's such a peaceful drug, such a positive drug. They're extremely safe. They're psychologically extremely safe, pharmacologically, physiologically. The worst thing you'll get is an upset tummy. If you eat them on an empty stomach, or too many like that. But even that, there's nothing that psilocybin mushrooms can really do to hurt anybody. And so the mushrooms have reached at least more than 1 in 12 Americans. When they say we'll assemble a jury of your peers, fuck them. They can't.
Sure.
The mushrooms have reached at least 1 in 12 people. So I feel as a veteran, growing and giving away mushrooms, transporting veterans for fellow veterans, I don't give a fuck what law you have on the books. I dare you to assemble a jury of my peers and come after me. And like I did in Colorado, if I got to sit in solitary and not comply with any of your, I had to sit in solitary for 12 days. It wasn't like nothing, although I had a lot of fun with it. I made them feed me vegan too, because I'm vegan, and it's a right you can claim in jail. It's a religious diet that they have established. They have a responsibility in American jails and prisons to respect. So I was like, fuck you. You're going to feed me vegan. No, I don't want to put on oranges. No, I don't want to take fingerprints. Yes, I want to use the phone. No, not with it being monitored. You give me the real phone, because I demand my right as a pro se defendant to legal privacy. And after 12 days, and I filed a motion on the religious defense, they basically gave up. They didn't even, and apologized. They didn't even charge me for my vehicle towing and impound for 12 days, which was nice. But anyway, to my point, with the reason I bring up Homefront Battle Buddies and mushrooms and stuff, you mentioned your friend as describing healing, right? And a lot of the motivation from the Department of Veterans Affairs, you've heard veterans say, especially the Vietnam era dudes, say, delay, deny, and wait for us to die. And there was a lot of bullshit from the VA. I went and got tested. They told me I have an acceptable level of depleted uranium in my system. But there's this.
Oh, wow.
There's a really destructive mentality in modern mental health overall. And we're all familiar with the corruption of the pharmaceutical industry across the board, right? They don't want you to be healthy. They want you to stay sick and dependent on pharmaceuticals. No shit. Not making any news with that announcement. And my personal experience was when I went to the VA and I told them I was having trouble sleeping. And I actually, to this day, I have issues with sleeping with PTSD. That's my one. I mean, when I was in solitary, I had to listen from around the corner to a World War II movie, and that kind of triggered me. But unless you put me in solitary and force me to listen to war movies, I've got my PTSD pretty well handled. I just occasionally have problems sleeping. And so I take Klonopin, but I didn't get that from the VA. I got 5 different prescriptions. 3 of them had suicide listed as a side effect. And I was like, I dabbled with one of them a little bit, and I was like, fuck this. This is like smoking weed, but with a headache. How about I just smoke weed? And I was really fortunate to not have any kind of bullshit job where I got to take a urinalysis. And I had friends in the DC anti-war scene who always had access to great cannabis. So, I was good on that. But a lot of guys aren't so lucky. A big part of what's driving the veteran suicide epidemic is bad pharmaceuticals. But even deeper than that, and this is what I want to get at, is a mentality of sickness when it comes to mental health, a paradigm of disease and healing. And I think you've heard it said PTSD is a sane reaction to an insane situation.
Oh,
Men with
sure.
healthy minds
Sure.
experiencing intense trauma are supposed to be fucked up from it. You're supposed to develop a hyper awareness. You're supposed to be affected by that. If you're a healthy brain, then you're supposed to come out and be able to readjust and go back to a healthy baseline of operations, of not hyper awareness, of not that disassociated anxiety and stress with PTSD.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
It's the sickos who can go through that kind of fucked up trauma and be like, "Ha, I'm fine." Those are the guys you got to worry about. Those are the guys who are sick at a deeper level. Those are the ones who throw puppies off cliffs and piss on dead bodies and shit like that. Right? But with Homefront Battle Buddies and with what I've learned, I would like to take a completely different paradigm of approach to mental health that is about immaturity and stunted growth and weaknesses that can be strengthened. When you go through a PTSD experience, you're not broken. You don't need to be healed from a trauma. It's like having a muscle cramp. Yeah, you did something funny with your muscles and you got one that's a little tight. Let's rub on it and get it back to normal operating. Let's exercise it well and get it back up to strength. Oh, you get in fights at bars a lot? Well, you have an impulse control problem that leads you to substance abuse and to hitting people because you're fucking emotionally immature and never developed the strength of control, of self-discipline, of impulse control. And so the pharmaceutical and mainstream therapy approach, and 90+% of what guys are doing through or with the VA is of that sickness mentality. And it's not saying, it's saying let's stop the symptoms. Let's accept that you're weak. Let's not address that. Let's just control your symptoms and heal your wound. And obviously these are competing metaphors, right?
Sure.
But I could give you all the data. There's so many studies that back up what I'm saying in this in terms of what kind of therapy is actually effective. And the other big component of this that is really shut out of modern mental health, and I mean, veterans kind of know this. This isn't groundbreaking either. But if your physical health isn't at least decent, your mental health's going to be fucked up. Sugar. If you're addicted to sugar, that's going to affect your mood. If you're not sleeping well, you're not going to be able to think straight all day. If you're fat and overweight because you got into some injury, if you have something, just whatever it is, tap back into that military mentality of like, you know what, I'm a warrior. I got to maintain my weapon. My first weapon is my mind. My second weapon is my body. My third weapons is everything, weapons, knives, traditional bullshit outside of your body. But if your mind isn't sharp and your body's not sharp, you're a fucking useless tool. And your mind can't be sharp if your body's not healthy, if your diet is off, if your self-care routine is off, if you're not exercising, your brain is going to have weaknesses and deficiencies that would be stronger if you took care of that basic shit. So then you apply that to PTSD, you apply that to trauma. Let's think about that trauma. I'm all for the processing of that trauma, but there's a major downside with that mainstream mental health paradigm of venting. And venting is training your brain to have negative thoughts.
What do you mean? What's venting? I haven't heard that.
I'm feeling negative, so let me vent all my negativity. Let me spend time expressing all of my negativity. Now, some people would say there's venting that's good and there's venting that's bad, and I don't give a fuck about your semantic peculiarities here. You know what I mean? My point is clear. Processing versus venting is the distinction I'm making. There is a role for processing, and a big part of psychedelics, especially or alternative therapies, especially the pharmaceutical MDMA or ecstasy, is that it opens you up to go through those like a lot of dudes or people of all genders. There's only two, right? Troll me, I dare you. But yeah, there's all people have, coming out of trauma, that tendency to fall into that old paradigm. And a lot of dudes, uh, when are a lot of people looking back at their traumas, are incapable of looking at them, examining them psychologically, being able to talk through them, because they have emotional hangups, so they have triggers. Oh, I can't talk about what happened in Iraq. It just makes me too upset. Let's not talk about it. Well, then you're a fucking pussy who hasn't processed this shit. You're a coward. Suck it up. Face your shit. At least be comfortable talk. If you can't talk about it, you're not holding on to your experiences. You're holding on to weakness and emotional immaturity. And if you really want to get over it, you got to face those weaknesses like that. So yeah, MDMA in particular is an empathy-inducing drug. And if you go through a guided session with a therapist who knows how to handle a patient doing MDMA trauma processing, it's almost 100% effective when you do two sessions 2 weeks apart, according to landmark study from about, I think it was 5 years ago on that. Look up MAPS, the group, Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. They, have in particular been leading the charge for MDMA, legalization. And I spoke at one of their fundraisers for getting the money to get MDMA through FDA clinical trials. And it's like, why don't veterans have the freedom to put whatever the fuck we want in our bodies? Oh yeah, because the government we fought for is still conducting this bullshit drug war. Like, you want to tell me I fought for freedom and I'm not allowed to do mushrooms that I grew myself on my own land? Yeah, right. Something's wrong with your Romero Fantasyland programming.
How have you, with this program, how have you been able to help vets? What's some results that you've had?
Well, I should say we're just getting started.
Okay.
So our ultimate goal is to have a facility with a lodge and a barracks attached, with a greenhouse and a gym and all the relevant outdoor fun stuff, and a big Pugil Sticks Thunderdome, of course. But with the lodge and barracks primarily, what we want to be able to do is provide free 1 week retreats for any veteran in the country to come, and in a safe, supervised area, and somewhere that's legally safe, physically safe, emotionally safe, where you're around other vets, maybe even group by experience, that you have the ability in that week to step away from everything else in your life and really consider what you're capable of for self-improvement and self-empowerment. And the drug therapies are really just one component of that. I'm a big fitness buff. I want to help dudes develop efficient fitness routines while they're here. But where we're at right now, we're just taking internships because we don't have the funding, we don't have the facilities. We just have the seed of the organization planted. Although we also have 5 acres of my 10-acre property dedicated to it, so that's a pretty good start. We've got 5 acres fenced in. We've got our 501c3 status. We got a board of directors, but we need staff, and we need volunteers. We need help fundraising, and I'll get my plug in here. Aside from homefrontbattlebuddies.org, which is an admittedly amateur website for the time being, and my email is adam@thefreedomline.com. That's all 3 words, thefreedomline.com. And more importantly, you can find me on Telegram at Adam versus the Man. But yeah, adam@thefreedomline.com. If anybody is listening this far into the podcast and you haven't blown your shit yet, send me an email, drop me a line. We need help. We need warriors. Too many of us getting out of the military give it up, and we fight for our benefits, and we get fucking lazy. We go from children who think that we're growing up to be warriors, to soldiers who are serving bankers, politicians, and war profiteers, to pussies left on the sidelines of society as veterans who want to sit there and take their benefits and just jerk off all day. Fuck that. This world still needs its warriors. In fact, I would say now more than ever, as society is emasculated, all this trans bullshit. I mean, I'll give you can do whatever the fuck you want with your own body. You want to identify as a certain thing or by certain pronouns. Yeah, sure. You want to lop off your own dick? Yeah, I'm going to say that's really fucking stupid. And I'm going to be critical, but I'm not going to use government to stop your right to do that. But the reason it's being such a hot button issue when it's really relatively irrelevant is they want to give young men who are afraid to grow up to be men the chance to be women instead. There it is. That's the bottom line. They want to support the emasculation of society because they, them, those do not want warriors. They do not want assertive men capable of standing up for themselves. This is why in the military they make you shave. And by the way, Walt, I appreciate that you at least have a nice Van Dyke. You know what that's called. It's a Van Dyke.
It's the best I can do.
Yeah. All right. I appreciate that. No, just when your balls drop, the rest of your facial hair will come in, and you really should grow a full beard. But no, I appreciate that. It's actually, I like your style. It's nice on your face, and I've been staring at it like this whole time while my video is off. No, he's got a very nice mustache and a well-shaped chin point of a goatee with a little bit of flavor saver on it, and it's a bit big on the bottom, but generally that's referred to as a Van Dyke men's hairstyle. I have the full, almost Viking beard with a silly mustache like turned up on the ends, not quite handlebar. I'll get there. Give me a few more months. But no, like this is why in the military they make you shave. They want you to look like a woman. It's not about gas masks anymore. That's bullshit. They want you emasculated because it makes you obedient. It makes you feel like you're part of a hierarchy. And it's a subtle, it's a really funny little thing to nitpick on, but it's a subtle form of emasculation in a way where, we want you to be strong attack dogs, but we want you to have your balls cut off so you're obedient. And then when you get out of the military, we want to give you enough money to be quiet. We're not going to have a bonus army march on the Capitol again like after World War I. If you don't know that, the history. Yeah, if anybody's listening don't know it, I'm not going to get into it because I'm not an expert. But look up the bonus march of World War I veterans marching on the U.S. Capitol, being put down by he was a colonel at the time, but was it Schwarzkopf and Douglas or McGregor? The famous World War II generals were like young officers who actually came out and fucking shot at veterans asking for benefits that they had been denied. The government's not going to let that happen again. They can print enough money until the dollar collapses. Us veterans are going to be taken care of. So if you're on disability or any kind of benefits like me, you better put your time to good use to fight the system that put us in this position. And I think we have the opportunity, if we really come together, those of us who understand that militarism is a poison, the way that the original actual founders of this country did, because they were against standing armies. We can make sure that we are the last generation of combat veterans humanity ever knows. No more poor men dying to line rich men's pockets. Smedley Butler, war is a racket. No more suckers dying for dumb, violent rackets. Fuck all that. It's time to... War is when government tells you who the enemy is. Revolution is when you figure it out for yourself. Let's have a revolution.
With your experience and or your experience, I guess. If you meet a kid who maybe still has a couple of years left on his contract, it's obvious how you would which direction you would steer him if you had the opportunity. Right. But how do you speak to that? Maybe they're like, oh, maybe this isn't the best thing I got going on here, or maybe they're even just raw. But specifically somebody who's like, man, I wish I didn't have a couple of years left. What do you say to that?
So I'm not such a unrealistic ideologue to say the military is so toxic you can't go anywhere near it. That's ridiculous.
Sure.
But yeah, you shouldn't help kill for politicians. You shouldn't be working for the man. You shouldn't be paying taxes to people who hate you. And if someone's like 18 years in and they got 2 years to go for their retirement, I'll say fucking hold your breath. Get your retirement
Mm,
and then use that money for good. But while you're in, immediately know where your lines are that you won't cross. I won't torture people. I won't
mm,
send drones. I will, if it comes down, like, it's not worth killing. It's not worth sacrificing your conscience for the rest of your life to kill somebody because you needed to stay in 2 more years to finish your contract or get your retirement money. Fuck that. If you can refuse deployment, but hey, if you got a little time left and you're like, fuck, I'm in the warehouse, I'm a supply fucking poke, and I can just hide in the back, and I can even smoke weed in the back of this joint. Fuck this. I'm not gonna get out. I'm gonna ride it out. I'm gonna finish my contract. I can
mm,
respect that, but not re-upping once you know this, not staying in if you don't have to. And if you're early in your deployment
mm,
or early in your career or your term, get out as a conscientious objector. And it's not as hard as they make you want to believe. No shit. There's a
mm,
website called GIRightsHotline.org. And they actually have a hotline. And it's military law specialists who will help people go through the conscientious objector process. And anybody else who's facing any kind of military discipline and all, they will help you with that as well, all
mm.
pro bono. So GIRightsHotline.org. I share that with everybody who's feeling the pang of conscience.
When you talk to folks who say, like, just your standard typical American, how kind of a two-part question, how do they respond? Well, maybe it's one part actually. How do they respond to your story and your viewpoint? And do they, assuming that they don't accept it, how do they just dismiss it, or do they kind of write it off as like a one-off experience? Does that make sense?
Well, when you say the average American, it's quite the spectrum, and I
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
have
that's
a lot
true.
of
That's true.
experience. No, I'll try to answer it with that premise in mind. But I have a lot of experience with this as a political activist, as a politician, and as an
Sure.
independent media producer. One of the things I'm known for with Adam versus the Man, you go back on my YouTube channel, is I do man on the street videos. And I expose people's contradictions through a Socratic reasoning and putting them on the spot and exposing the irrationality and the contradictions in their political positions. And either they're open-minded and they go, oh shit, I didn't know that, sorry, can we move on to the next subject, but thanks. Or they're like, oh, that's really interesting, they engage. So there's those kind of positive responses. But I think what you're getting at is the more fun examples when people refuse to let go of their emotional attachments to irrational ideas. And then I get to
Mm,
I get to poke at them and make them look really stupid. Like, well, I think the United States needs a military. Oh, so you disagree with the founders who are against standing armies. Oh, so you want people to be soldiers instead of warriors, huh? And I mean, I could just ask these
mm,
questions all day long if I had to, and people just stutter and stammer and look like idiots when they're on camera. But to your question more about
hmm,
the average American, I'll answer it by pointing out what I see right now in the post-COVID or third COVID season we're coming into here, right?
right.
Um,
Sure. Sure.
it's like they're lying. We know they're lying. They know we know they're lying. We know they know that they know whatever they're lying, and they're still lying. It's
Hmm.
that deep psychological Stockholm syndrome of wanting to love and worship your captors and going along with things that you know are lies. And so
Hmm.
I've kind of shifted from arguing reason and logic with people who are emotionally attached to their positions because it doesn't work. So you kind of have to, and it's not that you have to appeal to their emotions, but you have to understand, why do people have emotional attachments to things? Sometimes it's just misunderstanding. And if you can get them to be open minded, you can point out some things and they go, oh, okay, thanks. Yeah, no, you're right. All right. I have a little trouble letting that go. But no, thank you. You've improved my worldview. I understand things better now. Cool. And that's great when you can get that.
Hmm.
Um, and right now there's so much discontent that when you say the average American, I think the average American, I mean, if there's a black swan moment, if there's like a layer of kindling in society ready to ignite, it's that acceptance of the lie being rejected. Americans have been sitting with that. You know, people, we've been lied to about the military, but we've been so propagandized. Most Americans didn't really know they were lying. But in terms of America as a whole, like, yeah, we know they lied about 9/11 the same way they lied about the Gulf of Tonkin and the sinking of the Lusitania and so many other bullshit false flags in American history. But under COVID, it really accelerated. So, like, here's another big lie. And I think the modern crisis that we're in really goes back to the financial crisis of 2008. And the big lies then were along the lines of, well, politicians really have your best interest at heart. We're really printing and spending all this money to help poor people. And it's like, well, then why do the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer? Either you're full of shit or you're really dumb. And I'm pretty sure you're not that dumb because you're kind of rich yourself. So there was a new, like, in the era of the internet, it became a lot harder to deny these things. And, you know, all the facts were there. You could look anything up for yourself. But there was a turning point, a real inflection, escalation, acceleration around the financial crisis of 2008 that has led into all the way up to this third COVID season and the unfolding of World War III. And this is all acting in desperation. You know, the obscene concentration of wealth that we've seen in the Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, you know, how much more they're making compared to the average American. It's like human productivity has been increasing exponentially since we escaped hunter-gatherer status and to the industrial age and farming and blah, blah, blah. And the increase in quality of life over the last, you know, several thousand years for the average human being has been more or less linear. And that exponential growth is what is exponentially being skimmed off the top by the predator class, by the beneficiaries of this system. And all this wealth is on paper. If Putin is able to crash the dollar, and it looks like that's what he's really doing with the Ukraine conflict and only taking rubles now for Russian oil and gas, it's going to crash the dollar. And when that happens, you know, all of that becomes irrelevant. They're getting their last licks in on a dying system. And I don't think the dollar is going to crash tomorrow. I'm not a doomsdayer. I think there's going to be continued periods of upheaval. You know, things might get a little bit worse before they get better, but they're about to get a lot better. You know, we're about to be able to beat aging medically. We're about to have drones you can sit in and fly anywhere you want without government permission, without roads. You know, we're about to have computers attached to our heads, if not implanted in our brains. And I don't want to do that as long as government can get a back door to my chip. But that gives me all the more urgency in saying, you know, let's get rid of this evil cancer on society known as government as soon as possible.
Yeah.
I'm the one smoking weed right now. You should be smoking weed as you ponder all this. How much of this is new to you?
Oh, I'm pretty familiar with it for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm definitely yeah.
Well, the whole perspective on militarism and mental health.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah, for sure. And that's part of why I started the podcast, was to let the listener kind of get an inside look into different aspects of being in the military. You know, whether it be something great or something difficult or something unenjoyable or something disgusting, a lot of those things you're not gonna see unless you personally know someone that's willing to just really open their heart to you.
Yeah.
So
Well,
this podcast format, gives complete strangers the opportunity to to kind of hear someone open their soul a little bit. So
yeah. Well, I hope it resonates with a lot of guys that the heart of what I'm saying is shit you already know in your soul that you just haven't acknowledged yet, because the implications are pretty intense. Like, in order to believe that your military service was righteous in the global war on terror, you have to think this ridiculous lie that the American government has done all sorts of fucked up, evil, dishonest imperialism and murdered tens of millions, if not a couple 100 million. If you include sanctions and starvation and so many other things, it's in the hundreds of millions. The U.S. military has killed millions of innocent people in the past, but when I was born, they stopped doing all of that, and now everything the government does is righteous and honest and just. And you have to believe that ridiculous lie to hold on to the idea that you're and I'm not bitter about the experience itself. Like, I enjoyed the challenge. I'm bitter about being used. And I think a lot of veterans, and I would hope a lot of people listening to this, are scared to admit that. Say, fuck you. Get over your fears, you pussies. You stop hiding from this truth. I don't care how big and how strong and how tough you are on the outside. If you're not able to acknowledge this part of reality and you end up being a bootlicker subservient to petty bureaucrats and dumpy little men with whiny voices who fucking hate you because they think you're an animal to be used, fuck you. Get over your fear. Be a real man.
Yeah, I've noticed when I change my opinion or change my viewpoint on something, often I'll internally accept it, or at least be aware that I'm probably going to accept it before I verbally say that I accept it. So you talking about how, you're talking to a listener and saying, this in your heart.
Yeah.
You're just not willing to admit it yet.
Yeah.
I think that rings true just in that sense that, you typically, I guess maybe this is a sissy way of saying it, but I want to be sure about my position before I state something.
Yeah.
So I think about it, and internally I'm like, this sounds right, and I'm probably going to change my mind, but I haven't gotten to that point yet where I'm willing to say it.
Well, this is what I would say. First, prioritize. This is probably the most important thing that's ever been discussed on this show for your audience, for veterans, right? I mean, there's some things I'm sure you've done that have saved guys' lives in terms of, learning how to deal with specific challenges and PTSD and all that. But for the guys who aren't struggling that way, this is really the most important thing you could do with your time, is prioritize to get your head straight on this shit, and don't waste time. Like you said, I appreciate your process, Walt. You got to think about it first. And I assume anybody who's still listening is thinking about some of this. And then maybe you have to process it. You have to absorb it. You have to weigh it against your other beliefs. You have to integrate it with your worldview. And then you have to speak it. But that doesn't have to be separate in the process. You can start talking, playing devil's advocate for yourself, against yourself, in conversations, and see how it feels and explore it. But most of us are too afraid with fellow veterans to even get into the shit that matters like this. But here's the part that people are really scared of, Walt, and it's not understanding or integrating or articulating or even being confident in consistently articulating it. It's acting on it. That's what people are afraid of. If this is true, if what Adam is saying is true, if when you're in the military, you take orders from politicians who work for corrupt people who are fucking corrupt assholes themselves, and you go and murder people based on those orders, you're doing evil. You're on the side of evil.
Yeah. What's the application? What's the action I have to take from that knowledge?
And so then,
sure.
As a veteran, the implications are, well, as a human being, The first implications are sort of lifestyle. Don't support government in any way that you don't have to. Like, I drive a car, I pay the gas tax, I drive on government roads, sure. But I don't hold US dollars. I hold silver and crypto if I ever have currency to hold, or I buy real assets, because then you're paying the inflation tax, which makes it possible for them to print money, which is how they fund their wars and all the other great evils of government. If you're working for the man, if you're working a W-2 paycheck job, and you're paying taxes out of that, you add up all the fees, fines, hidden costs, and other costs of government associated with that, you're working for government half the fucking year. Fuck you. You're part of the problem. You're going to have to let that shit go. You're going to have to find a way to make an honest living, working under the table, or as an entrepreneur running your own business, where all of your costs are run through an LLC and your tax liability is non-existent. But if you're just sort of passively in your lifestyle going along and have been fooled into using half of your labor to support the evil of the system, like, even if you have a good job, you work at a grocery store, right? And you create value by putting vegetables out on the rack. But half of the money that you earn, that store is able to pay you for your work, of that value that you've generated from them, you have to turn around and give to the government. The value of that labor of you have now spent half of your time at work putting vegetables on the shelves, doing it to fund evil. Fuck you. You are part of the problem. Stop doing that. And I don't say immediately, I'm not unrealistic, and I don't hold anybody, I don't even hold myself to 100% standard, like I said, but you're being fucking lazy if you're working for government half the year, and you're lazily going along with and materially supporting evil with your labor in just a huge, sick, inexcusable way. So I'm an entrepreneur. I have a variety of LLCs and businesses and nonprofits that I move money through to get shit done and this is legal tax avoidance. Most of what I'm saying is legal. I do a few things that are illegal, technically, I'll say, that are petty, that things that I don't report. Like, technically, according to the IRS, any barter of value over $20, you're supposed to report to them. Like, nobody does that shit. So there's a lot of petty shit that I will advocate for that is illegal. But overall, tax avoidance is more of a legal strategy of minimizing your liability and not working for the evil man half the year. Lifestyle wise, living off grid. It's funny. I was doing a podcast earlier today with two gentlemen in California, and 3/4 of the way through the podcast, as I was talking about, you really should leave Babylon as before it crumbles and a piece of it falls on your head. And right then, he had a power outage at his house. Then he ran outside, and there were power trucks there saying, "Sorry, dude, your power's going to be out for a few hours." And he texted from his phone to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do." It's like, you just fucking made my point. I have solar and wind power, and I never have to deal with government coming in or some corporation that's got some government privilege monopoly and have them fuck with my electricity. I do not. I am off grid for power. I get water from a local community well. I'd rather have my own well, but they're a little expensive here because we got a lot of rock between the surface and the water table. It's about $40,000 to get a well. And I don't grow food yet. We're working on that greenhouse. But I'd like to be, and I don't, again, not 100% standard. I'll still probably buy some of my favorite sauces online, or, little seasoning things that we can't make here. But I'm going to be, 99% food independent when we are fully done with, developing our food engine here. And while I'm vegan, I believe you can have voluntary ethic eggs and milk with, free range chickens and goats. And so we're going to be doing that here, but no meat, except for animals that die, natural causes. I don't want to eat animals anyway. I've been a vegan for 4 years. I've been a strict nutritional vegan, eating one meal a day, only one meal. Like, I fast for 22 hours and then I have a 2-hour feast. And then I stop. And I eat vegan one meal a day, and I actually have gained more muscle doing that than with any other diet strategy I've ever had.
Interesting. Yeah, that
everything you've been taught is wrong.
You are nothing but counterculture.
Yeah, right. That's thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. That's one way of putting it. Yeah. Well, culture is nothing more than a collective series of bad habits.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
I'm not so much counterculture as like anti-culture itself. No, that's not
Okay.
true.
Sure. Sure.
I'm actually a bit of a traditionalist. And one of the things I'm doing with my homestead, I have a super hot girlfriend. I have an amazing wife, and we're looking to add one or two more women to our relationship before we start having kids. And I think the ultimate freedom that I've embraced is, oh, sorry, with the family thing, I want to create a dynasty family here. Not, I mean, we wring our hands about, oh, the destruction of the nuclear family is being atomized. And yeah, that's like
Hmm.
from the worst side of the spectrum, one step further. But on the other side of the spectrum is the dynasty family or the extended family. And I think that's a big thing that,
Hmm.
prevents men from being men and people from being assertive, prevents women from being empowered to be women. And it robs us of, a greater level of family stability. But the freedom I'm talking about, the real freedom that's
Hmm.
important here, because I believe in culture, in the sense that I believe in tradition. I'm being kind of facetious there and making fun of culture.
Right.
But what I want is the culture could be, you can say that a culture is a phenomenon of a society or a phenomenon of an individual, right? An individual defines their culture or their part of the culture that they embrace. And obviously there's a lot of semantic shit I'm going to avoid in talking about culture. But so I want everybody to be empowered to really define their own culture and at a deeper level with absolute emotional freedom, not giving a fuck what anybody else thinks. Be able to design your dream life from the ground up without any pressures or expectations from other people. And that's real freedom. And I live that every day and I fucking love it.
Hmm. One. This is. I feel like I'm circling way back to the very beginning of the episode. One given especially your position and views on the military, when you were in, especially being in the Marines, everybody's like, oh, once a Marine, always a Marine. There's that the brotherhood of the warrior or the soldier or
Yeah,
um,
right.
the camaraderie, of
Right.
a
Yeah, yeah.
combat unit. What how what, now that you're out, and how have those relationships, have they continued, or was it just while you were in there was that tightness and then now everybody's moved on kind of thing?
When I was deployed, I was on a 6-man civil affairs team
Mm-hmm.
and I was a sergeant. Our commander was a major. We had a chief warrant officer 5 or a gunner. And then we had a
Mm-hmm.
staff sergeant, me, a corporal, and a lance corporal. So about as much rank stretch gap as you can get with 6 Marines, lance
Oh,
corporal to
sure.
major.
Sure.
So, I mean, me and the major were kind of cool, but I made fun of him for being a dumpy reservist and former National Guardsman and shit like that, kind of behind his back. And I mean, he's a cool guy, Major DeRocher. I'll name him. He's a good dude. And we've been in touch once or twice, but we were never really friends. And I don't think it ever came this way on the perspective on militarism.
Sure.
Warrant officer and I, the gunner, we were actually pretty friendly, little buddy, but there was always kind of a rank distance, and he was an arrogant old
Right.
dude. But he's a nice guy, And then Lance Corporal, Aceves Poppy, we called him. Now, what was his actual name? We called him Poppy. It's something that started with, it's like placentas. We used to make fun of it. It was like,
Ah,
his last name
sure.
was an Hispanic name that sounded kind of like placenta, and so we made fun of him for that. And we just called him
What?
Poppy.
And he joined the military anyways
Yeah, well, he
with
was.
that
Well,
name.
hey, my last name is Kokesh. As a reservist, they called me Kotex because I get bloody once a month. Yeah, the no, but he was actually, now that I recall, he was Lance Corporal when we got out, but he was a PFC.
Mm,
Echo 2 Poppy was his call sign, like
mm,
Echo 2 Papa. He was still, all right, you're Poppy now. Um,
right.
And our corporal was really jealous of me, Corporal Kavicki. Good dude, but we were both corporals when we met at Pendleton, and then I got a meritorious sergeant in Kuwait as we were on our way into Iraq. And then it was like, yeah, motherfucker, now it's not just time. Now I'm the one on the team who outranks you. And on a small team with that rank spread, that was really relevant. But my staff sergeant, him and I have been good friends since then. He's even visited me in jail. And so on one of my civil disobedience escapades that was in his neighborhood in Texas. So yeah, and then I have a bunch of guys I had that's my whole pool of like my war buddies, and we really just came together. We were all reservists who just came together as a team for that one deployment. So I did kind of miss that unit camaraderie experience of the military. There were a lot of guys I'm still in touch with, just but I don't have like really tight relationships with them, and a lot of them are in that category of, oh man, I really like what you're doing. I don't agree with all of it, but I really respect it. And it's because they're afraid. They're still afraid, and it's really sad that as brave as they make you in some ways, they really condition you to be a coward when it comes to standing up for shit that warriors do. Standing up to illegal orders, standing up to the bigger evils of the world. And again, I would just say the world needs its warriors now more than ever. And we need a revolution, not another war. We need, and I'm not saying a bloody revolution or even a specific revolution. Really, I'm talking more about the human evolution to a better society. And I think that's inevitable. But we need warriors to be a part of that, to understand that our enemies are not to be found in the sands of some far off land, but rather right here at home in the capitals.
Yeah, and that's a big step for somebody to take, a vet who's considering that, especially if, because a lot of vets, maybe not even a lot, but there's a significant number of vets, I should say, whose identity is largely defined by their
unhealthy
service.
Ego attachment to their military experience and identity.
Yeah. Or
because modern society and government schools and the general emasculation of America has you so beaten down. And this is true about me. My parents got divorced when I was 10, and I had all sorts of issues with them. And so joining the military was like a way to prove that I'm a man and I'm independent. I can be on my own. And why don't you get that when you turn 18, having gone through the government school system? Because they don't give you that, because government doesn't want you to have that. And so I understand that when you join the military, you become somewhat unique as someone who has a sense of purpose in a world full of NPC, drone, idiot, average American citizens. But and so it's hard to let that go. But really self-actualized human beings don't need toxic masculinity to embrace their divine masculinity. They don't need institutional crutches to be fully realized human beings.
Yeah.
Take your time.
Yeah. I'm not a quick talker.
No, I know this is not what you typically talk about either. It's got to be a bit of a surprise to you, and I hope a lot to process, and I hope a lot for your audience to process. And I will say I admire your apparent intellectual, emotional, spiritual humility in how you've responded and so far to ideas that are very challenging to most veterans.
Well, I like it to be real organic, just to the flow, not really structured, but just more of a conversation. The goal is kind of just replicate a conversation you'd have with a friend or something.
Well, then I'm talking way too much.
So. The show does better when I talk less. Let's put it that way. No, I mean, I appreciate what you're saying. It's even for somebody who doesn't hold that viewpoint, I think it's important to be exposed to it, or um, maybe
No,
be willing.
if you don't
Maybe be
have that
willing
viewpoint,
to
you're
hear.
fucking wrong. If you don't have this viewpoint, you're fucking wrong. And you're a coward and you are going along with evil. And all that is required, and this is some dumb quote, I'm forgetting the source, all that is required for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing.
Oh yeah, Burke, Edmund
Yeah,
Burke,
something
I
like
think.
that.
Yeah.
Thank
Hmm.
you.
Yeah. Well, okay. Fair enough. I think to not be willing to be confronted with a differing viewpoint, or at least consider a differing viewpoint.
Right. That's the first step.
I think, yeah, exactly. No matter how right someone is convinced they are, I think it's important to look at the other side, if for nothing else than to be able to improve your position.
Right. And to reaffirm your confidence in your own position, if you are right.
Oh, sure. To get all military about it. If you're setting up a defensive position, an intelligent person will step out and look at their position from where the enemy's coming from,
Absolutely.
and assess their position.
Yes.
and assess their weaknesses and whatnot. So, that's what I try to do. Not to blow my own penny whistle, but to look at other people when someone has a criticism or a differing viewpoint, even to just listen to it and say, okay, well, how does this apply to me? Can I learn from this? Should I change my viewpoint to adjust towards this, or should this adjust my viewpoint?
Yes.
As a clarification,
right? Well, I'd like to have a comprehensive worldview with intellectual integrity. Well, if I could apply your defensive position metaphor to the idea of militarism, if you are trying to defend the idea of militarism, if you are trying to defend the idea of killing for politicians, if you are trying to defend the status quo, if you are trying to defend mainstream American politics, your position is a turd surrounded by pieces of Swiss cheese. It is not defensible, and it is not worth defending.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very definitely a military style analogy there.
A turd wrapped in Swiss cheese. I never heard that one in the military, but it applies here.
If I guess you actually already mentioned it, but probably, but in case the listener really enjoys the experience of not hearing me and hearing you instead, where all can they find you? You mentioned the Odyssey and etc.
Yeah. Well, we just finished a season of Adam versus the Man, which is my main media production. So we don't have anything immediately in the works. We're working on feeling out a couple sponsorship deals to really get the program back up to where it needs to be with regularity and production values. But you can find me on Telegram at Adam versus the Man. And if you don't know what Telegram is, it's a better messaging app and works as a censorship-free replacement to all social media. So download the Telegram app. Find me there as Adam versus the Man. I've got that. That's my main feed, my main channel. You can also find the channel for Homefront Battle Buddies. And you can find the channel for the Garden of Freedom, which is our homestead here. And my own personal paradise, my 10 acres in the Arizona mountains. I just absolutely love it here. Every morning I run the perimeter with my dogs. Every morning I can anyway. And the other is Odyssey, odyssey.com, and it's ODYSEE. It's not the normal spelling. It's a blockchain-based video website, ODYSEE, as in C videos. Odyssey.com/@Adam Kokesh, which is also my Twitter handle, the other place I'm having fun taking on some corrupt bullshit within the Libertarian Party. I just recently decided I really don't give a fuck what anybody thinks. I've like this is a fun, like I just turned 40, and I want to go. If I may, end on an important note of humility. Okay, Twitter @Adam Kokesh, KOKESH. But I've recently, like around my quarter life crisis, kind of examined some of my weaknesses and emotional maturity, and I've learned to trust my instincts, and I've learned to care about what matters and not care about what doesn't matter. And I really don't like. I've been sort of calling out some bad actors in the Libertarian Party who I think are saboteurs recently. So that's what the fun on my Twitter feed, if you want to see that. But having a higher standard of integrity and expecting it from others, there's nothing wrong with that, and calling them out when they fail, when they lie, when they're dishonest, when they cheat, when they steal. Believe it or not, that happens in politics. And I wouldn't have the wherewithal or the confidence, to even do what I'm doing now, because I would be held back by the traps in my mind, the desire to be liked or validated, or the need for attention or validation. And now I'm just like, no, I really don't give a fuck what you think. I'm not going to pander anymore. And a lot of these people I'm taking on are going, well, we're going to expose you for this. And I'm like, yeah, I don't care. Like, I have enough resume of a reputation of civil disobedience, my writing, my books, my media production. I've been accused of everything under the sun. I don't give a fuck. If you want to form your opinion of me based on an angry ex-girlfriend, go right ahead. I'm not going to stop you. You are free in America to be as dumb as you want to be. But if you're going to be dumb, you got to be tough, and I'm going to make you pay for it. And there's going to be a lot of dumb fuckers out there going, man, I wish I'd listened to Adam, and I wish I'd done it sooner. I wish I'd ripped off the Band-Aid. And I'm not saying I'm perfect here. A lot of times recently even, and in all this, I've had to tell people, you know what? I'm sorry. I should have listened to you sooner. You were right. And the sooner we can admit that we're wrong and face our weaknesses, the sooner we can get stronger from them, or it grows strength to displace a weakness and become better, complete human beings. And to any veterans listening, if they're veterans listening to this, I don't think there are any veterans listening to this, because if you were doing what I'm doing, you'd have something better to do with an hour and a half of your time than listen to me rant. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say 99% of the veterans listening to this are in the category I would call being fucking cowards. And I don't condemn you as individuals. I'm not judging you, say you are a coward. I would try not to use that language. But stop being fucking cowardly. Get off your ass, acknowledge the truth, and then have the guts to act on it. So, hey, man, I really appreciate this. And this has been a lot of fun. Yeah. And I think a unique experience for me to talk to you as a veteran, as someone who you've had a deer in the headlights look for part of this, and I know you're not going to release your video, and you got a great smile and a great laugh, but I feel like I'm like, ha ha ha, I have to make him listen to this now. Because if we were having a conversation, I think you might not be as graciously as a host, receptive and open-minded, and just asking very appropriate and good understanding, probing questions. I think you've done a great job in this recording, creating something from both of us that I hope will be a tool for a lot of veterans to escape the various traps of their minds.
Thank you for listening to this episode of How I Embraced the Suck. If you enjoyed the show, tell a friend. And as my Girl Scout den mother used to say, stay frosty.
Tune in next time and support this production, because independent media needs you as part of the active, engaged audience to be viable. So thank you for making this work and this production possible.